Wolfpack, what is going on? It's your boy, the Wolf of Roto Street, RotoStreetJournal.com. We breed and feed you fantasy wolves. Here with your Week 9 fantasy football waiver wire rankings. Gonna go dive in to my top 15 waiver wire pickups of Week 9. This is an actual pretty juicy week compared to the last couple of weeks at least. A lot of potential usability out there, some nice streamers, and some nice interesting stashes out there. So Wolfpack, come on in. Let me know how I can help you get ready for your Week 9 waiver wire, who to prioritize, how much to spend on them. We'll talk about FAAB, all that good stuff as we go. So thanks again for being here, Wolfpack. It was the trade deadline today, as usual. Very uneventful. No huge news breaking or anything of that nature today. So sadly, nothing interesting to discuss on the trade deadline front, but lots to discuss on the waiver wire front. So as you get in here, if you don't mind hitting that thumbs up button, support the show, help us get out to more people, drop it in any share groups, any of that good stuff to help us continue to grow would be so appreciated, Wolfpack. And get all those questions in. As you know, we'll answer them all at the end of the show. It takes about 20 minutes or so to get through all these top 15 names, and then I'll answer all your questions for the rest of the time. So come on down. Let's get it. Let's get it today, Wolfpack. First, before we dive into some of those names, though, check in some of your more shallow leagues or just in leagues. I've often seen these guys dropped. I got him in one of my deeper leagues, JD Mckissick. We'll talk about first, though, Michael Carter, who he's 68% rostered right now. And these guys would be below the load. Go get these guys, spend whatever amount of FAAB it takes, 50%, 70%. It doesn't matter. These are the true difference makers that are still somehow out there in a bunch of leagues. Michael Carter would be the most interesting. We talked about him a lot on our Risers show yesterday. 14 targets, hauled in 9 of them for 95 yards. This is a running back, not a receiver, folks. 15 carries as well, 77 yards. So 29 ultimate opportunities for this guy as he ran 70% of snaps, 60% of the routes. I mean, just the absolute dynamite play there. So if he's out there, Mike White is looking like he's going to make another start. 44% of his passes went to running backs in his first start. 40% went to him in his second start. This guy loves to pepper the position, and clearly Michael Carter, he's doing a lot of damage with the work he's getting as well. So that was beautiful to see from him. 32.5 fantasy points. Definitely check for Michael Carter first and do whatever you have to go to get him. Not too far off, though, in terms of receiving volume was J.D. Mckissick, who's still out there. 56% of leagues. A lot of leagues he's getting dropped because they're on bye this week. I think that's a huge mistake. Another week with 8 targets. He had 8 catches, hauled them all in, 83 receiving yards. He played more snaps in back-to-back weeks now than Antonio Gibson, 32 compared to just 23 for Gibson, and had just as many touches, 11 total. But again, most of those coming through the air. We know how much more valuable the targets are compared to carries. So excellent performance from J.D. Mckissick, racking up 93 total yards, almost 17 PPR fantasy points. Just beautiful stuff for you guys out there. And the shin just continues to get worse, it seems, for Gibson. They do have a bye. Maybe he gets healthy through it. But either way, there could be a potential down the stretch where they rest him. They're out of the playoff hunt, and they clearly already are. Maybe we see Gibson get rested and just they shut him down for the year. McKissick would be that much more involved. I also would say go check out Cole Beasley, especially if Dawson Knox remains out. He's now seen 22 targets across his last 2 games without Dawson Knox. Pretty damn solid there. 10 catches this week on 13 looks, 110 yards. PPR monster, gets the Jags coming up this week. So even if Knox returns, there's still some value there. The Jags can just get absolutely battered. But if he remains out, there's just that much more. They're running that many more 3 wide receiver, 4 wide receiver sets without Knox. Could see Cole Beasley continuing this massive streak, only 54% rostered. And last but not least, he might actually be below a couple of the guys we talked about, but I did want to mention Brandon Eiuk, who's getting dropped in a lot of leagues right now. He's coming off a season high in snaps, 88%, route rate, 97%, and 25% target share. Now, granted, that only resulted in 7 targets, 45 yards, 7 catches. Nothing all that crazy, but he's trending in the right way. This is a guy that was the wide receiver 3 last year, behind only Devontae Adams and Tyreek Hill from week 7 to week 15 when he came the number 1. So there is that type of upside. You don't want to leave that just sitting out there. Should certainly be on benches as we see if he can continue to develop that role. Those are the guys to check for first. Now let's get into all the guys that are out there in at least 50% of leagues. in a lot of these lists, there's actually a lot that are out in like 90% or more of leagues. Pretty deep list, but actually some usability here. And again, Wolfpack, if you haven't already, that thumbs up does help us continue to grow. So let's continue on now, and let's chat about the biggest topic of this week. That's Derrick Henry going down, going to be out for most likely the entire season. If he returns, it's going to be the last week of your fantasy season, week 17, coming off the surgery. I can't imagine it's going to be a full workload. So at this point, you could probably drop Derrick Henry if you want to keep him in your IR for team morale, for the locker room. I guess go for it. I think that's getting rid of a competitive advantage potentially. I guess you never know. Should he get far along in the recovery ahead of time? The guy's a cyborg. He's going to be done for a while. So what is the backfield going to look like behind him? Well, first, let's just talk about the opportunity that's being departed. 28.7 carries per game to the running back position. They lead the NFL right now with 260 attempts. They're second in rushing yards, 1,183, and rushing touchdowns with 13. This is a massive ground pie that is being vacated. Now, nobody's here saying Adrian Peterson or Jerry McNichols is Derrick Henry. There's nobody in the NFL that's Derrick Henry. Still, as we saw with Dearness Johnson just a couple weeks ago, when there's a juicy ground pie, that's going to stay the backbone of this offense, at least as long as they allow it. Yes, we'll see more Tannehill, more A.J. Brown shouldering some work, but I still imagine they're going to try to feed the running back 25 plus times a week. That's going to be a little more divided up, but I do think, in my opinion, Adrian Peterson is the one you're going to want here. He gets signed, looked great in his workout, excellent shape was the exact quote. Had 7 touchdowns on a bad Detroit team last year and isn't that far removed from 2 pretty dang solid seasons over there with the Washington football team, averaging over 4.3 yards per carry in both those seasons, 898 and 1,042 rushing yards in those 2 seasons. I wouldn't be shocked to see AP thrive again. This is the perfect offense for him. No, the guy has never brought much passing juice to the NFL. We didn't really see Derrick Henry doing all that much, though, and I can't see Peterson being all that different. I think he's a glove-like fit for this power-based, a little mix of zone in there, too. But this is exactly what Adrian Peterson has done throughout his career. He is going to just eat behind this line. I think there's going to be plenty of touchdowns. Again, 13 through these first 9 weeks. A lot of rushing touchdowns, maybe a touchdown per week type of average could be out there for Adrian Peterson. I imagine 12 to maybe 15 carries or so. Yes, Jeremy McNichols will work in. I'm in the firm belief that Adrian Peterson is going to be the guy. I would be blowing 40 to 50% of my FAAB. If it's one shot or not, we're at week 9. I don't think there's going to be too many more people that emerge as potential season winners. So if you lost Henry or you're desperate for a running back right now, I really could see AP being a nice mid-range RB2. That could maybe even impress even more. And we're all just like, why didn't we bid more in week 9 when this guy has 10 touchdowns across his last 8 games here to close the season out? Wouldn't be shocked about that at all. Think it's going to be perfect. It just feels right, doesn't it? Right? This power scheme, the Titan blue. I think everything's going to look solid there. Now, granted, McNichols is younger, the better athlete. Like, there's a lot going for McNichols, better athlete at this stage of their career, let's say. Again, Adrian Peterson, one of the best to ever do it. Still, McNichols, we'll talk about him to kind of cover this backfield. He's the only number 7 on my list, so clearly you know who I'm prioritizing between these two. But let me tell you what the positives could be with McNichols and why I'm not as high on him. We've seen Adrian Peterson. Last year, he had 5 games with 15-plus touches. He can shoulder a heavy burden. McNichols in his NFL career has only seen 5-plus carries 3 times. He averages 3.1 yards per carry in those. His career high is 9 attempts. He turned that into 11 yards. Yes, I understand the Bucs, that line, that offense was completely different than what we're dealing with here in Tennessee. That doesn't change the fact that this guy has not held up to significant volume. He is not an every down back. He's 5'9", 205, so he's got a little bit of beef to him. And that's where the actual positives lie here with Jerry McNichols is as an athlete at this stage of career, 81st percentile with his 4.49 40. He's got, a speed score up in the 80th percentile as well. So the guy's got some little juice here. Certainly has some receiving chops. He's seen 27 targets already on the year, hauled in 21 of them. Some decent stuff there. And as a college rusher, 1,709 rushing yards at Boise State his senior year. He had 1,337 the year before. He can produce on the ground, clearly at the collegiate level. He just has not shown any of that in the NFL level. I think they went and signed Adrian Peterson as fast as they did because they don't trust McNichols in that feature early down role. I think that will be Adrian Peterson to a T. And he's going to be the guy. Again, I'd be spending about 50% or more of my FAAB. I think somebody's going to spend that on McNichols. I think they're going to end up regretting it. They should have spent it on Adrian Peterson. It's my opinion. But let me know what your thoughts are on this backfield. Either way, I think the number one person from week 9 is going to be one of these two, whoever is going to be the main fill-in for Henry. I'm putting my chips. I'm going all in on that being Peterson, and I'm going to throw some hefty bids to see if I can get him. Let me know if you have some questions, though. I do think it's worth the number one waiver priority or a high, top 3. It's worth it at this point. I do think it's worth about half of your FAAB to go get this guy. That's how strongly I feel about Adrian Peterson landing there. Let's now talk about my number 2 pickup, another running back. Should you miss on these Titan fill-ins, I think Boston Scott, especially over these next 2 to 3 weeks, as long as we've got Mr. Miles Sanders over there on the IR, I do think Boston Scott's going to be highly usable. He was the main back to begin the game. He's only 20% rostered. I think he deserves 20% or more of your FAAB in this new backfield. Now, granted, his 12 carries weren't even the team high. We saw 13 go to Gainwell and 12 also go to Jordan Howard. But Scott was by far the most productive. 60 yards, 2 scores on the ground compared to just 21 yards for Gainwell. We did see 57 yards and 2 scores for Howard, who looked better than he's looked in a few years now. Even still, though, this is what I kind of attach myself to when I say Boston Scott's by far the priority. First 15 plays were all Boston Scott in the Eagles backfield without Miles Sanders. The next 14, 5 went to Scott, 4 went to Jordan Howard. The next 17 plays, 11 Howard, 6 Scott. They had a big lead at this point. They were kind of churning. And then they closed the game out. Final 14 plays all went to Gainwell. All garbage time. They were up by like 40 at that point. So when they was early, Boston Scott was the one getting that early war. He also has 5 touches inside the 10-yard line across the 2 games. He's got 3 touchdowns in that span. He's converted 3 of those 5 into TDs right there. And he could get some receiving work done, Boston Scott can. A mini little Darren Sproles type, playing 45% of the snaps, leading the way, 29 for him, 20 for Gainwell, 16 for Howard. But again, the most meaningful ones, the first team, like games on the line early on in the action, it was Boston Scott's show. That's the guy I would be banging my chips onto. Jordan Howard, yeah, sure. In really, really deep leagues, you might take a stab at. But I think Boston Scott has far more value than Kenneth Gainwell, who looks like he might be the fantasy fool's gold of last week. Okay, guys, continue that thumbs up, share us out. Let's get this crowd going. Let's get more people in here. Would mean the world if you can try to help us gain that pack. I see 11 questions so far. Let's get that up to 40. Let's get a ton of questions in here tonight. I'd love it. Devante Parker, my number 1 receiver of the week and 3rd overall, my top 15 waiver wire rankings. He set season highs this last week. First game back of the shoulder injury. Season high in targets, 11, catches, 8, and receiving yards, 85. And he just looked great doing it. Tua showed more trust than he showed all last year, letting this guy go do his thing in contested situations. That's when he's at his best, Devante Parker. But even the routes, he was gaining some separation. And when he wasn't, Tua was giving some trust throws there. He's now attempted 126 passes in their last 3 games, Tua has. This offense is very air-centric, so averaging well over 40 attempts per game. They now have Houston coming up this next week. In the fantasy playoffs, they get the Jets, New Orleans, and Tennessee. 2 of those 3 are top 10 matchups for wide receivers there. New Orleans has potential to be a shootout if Tua can hold up his end of the bargains. Either way, we've got Devante Parker. This wasn't just like a 1-week fluke. He's back to trying to get him going. He's averaged 8.6 targets and a 24% target share across his full 5 games this season, 65.4 receiving yards, and at least 7 targets in all 5 games. I mean, this guy has been getting it done quite solidly. I think he is a immediate plug-and-play wide receiver 3 where there's not a ton of those guys out there at this point. So it dropped in tons of leagues, 36% rostered. I think he's well worth 15 to 20% of your FAAB if you're wide receiver needy or you need a bye-week plug-in coming up here. Potentially a better long-term option. I really like this guy, Rashad Bateman. We've talked about him multiple times on this show. A lot of people dropped him, though, because it was the bye week and they had a crunch, whatever it might be. He's only 31% roster. I think he's definitely worth 15% or more of your FAAB here. He stepped right in. He's seen 6 targets in back-to-back games, so averaging right around a 17% target share, 18% rather. He's averaged 17.1 routes per game. And out of the slot. So he's been moving all over the place. That's just out of the slot. So this guy is dynamite in terms of that. He's got 7 receptions on his 12 targets. He's racked up 109 yards in those 2 games. And this is pretty damn impressive considering he was on the IR for the entire season. He has been kind of working on the fly to get that chemistry done. He had 25, and 30-yard catches in week 7. So big play threat here, getting deep down the field. Don't forget about this guy. I think he could truly emerge as one of those set and forget wide receiver 3s. We know Parker's going to be that. So if it's one or the other, I'd probably prioritize Parker. We know what he is at this point. He's getting it done with Tua at levels we didn't see last year. I'd prioritize Parker, but right behind him, especially if you have a little bit of leash to let this guy develop on your bench, I love Rashad Bateman and what he could be for this Ravens offense. Let's just see what Sammy Watkins, his pending return. Is that going to force Bateman out of 2 wide sets? I imagine they're going to go with the rook. He's looked better than Watkins ever has. Maybe they kick Watkins in more inside. We'll find out. We will see. But I love this kid moving forward. Mark Ingram at the backfield, my 3rd running back of this week, 37% rostered. I think he's also worth 15% FAAB. These top 5, all guys I would spend pretty decent on, really solid options. And I don't know that we'll see options this great. And it starts to really thin out as the season goes on. I think Mark Ingram's a guy we're going to all wish we had rostered if he was out there in our leagues. Coming back to New Orleans, he gets 6 carries and 2 catches. Solid usage there, turns it into 52 yards against a pretty tough Tampa Bay run defense. So solid. He looked like he had more juice than we saw the entire time he was with the Texans, probably because he's getting more space in this offense. And it was just solid overall to see that. We saw 51 snaps go to Kamara, 22 went to Ingram, so a decent role. It wasn't like the olden days where it was a near 50-50 split between these guys. But again, 6 carries, 2 targets. He hauls them both in. 8 touches in this offense is no joke. Then you got the handcuff with benefit style upside if something happens to Kamara. Now, this isn't like the Drew Brees offense where Latavius Murray was averaging 30 points per game when Kamara missed time. But I think he could get 20 plus from Ingram. He'd have like low-end RB1 upside within this scheme. Remember last year, Murray had some of his best games when Taysom Hill was at QB. They got a lot more run heavy. Now that Jameis has torn his ACL, it could be more run centric of an attack. And this was his first game back in a while. This might be his lightest workload we see at only 8 touches. I think Ingram has returned home. It looked like he was pumped to be there playing with a newfound zip. I'm excited to see what he does the rest of the year there in New Orleans. Definitely should be rostered in far more leagues. Van Jefferson, my 3rd receiver on this list, 13% rostered, so better chance than the other 2 that he's out there for you. 8 to 10% FAAB is what I would spend on this guy, potentially even more. Now, he's been solid all year. He's averaging right now 6 targets in 4 of his 8 games. He's on pace in the games where he sees 6+ targets, and I'm going to talk about why I think that's going to be the kind of norm moving forward. But when he's seen 6+ targets, he's on pace for 11 TDs and 933 receiving yards, as well as 232 PPR points. That would put him in top 30 easily among wide receivers. And why do I think that will continue moving forward? Well, very favorable pass schedule. That's one. But also Deshaun Jackson released. He's out of there. We also have Tutu Atwell on the he's done for the year, season-ending injury. So this is it. This is their 3 wide receiver sets. And Van Jefferson's going to absolutely be their biggest lid lifter here. He played 46 of 57 snaps last week. These past 2 weeks, 94% and 84% of snaps and 89% average there across these last 2 weeks. So he already was heavily involved, even with Jackson and Tutu on the roster. Now those guys are either hurt or gone. I think it's just going to be almost an every down player, Van Jefferson. Then you stir in the fact, what if something happens to Robert Woods? What if something happens to Cooper Kupp? God forbid, the MVP of the year. Both of those guys have dealt with injury concerns throughout their career. So it's like a high risk, high reward type of start right now, but it also an ultimate handcuff with benefits. And again, tons of big game upside is like a plug into your flex. I really think this guy has a ton of value moving forward. And he again, 32 routes this last week was just as many as Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp. So high upside, usable flex, could bust on you. But anytime he's seen 6+ targets, he's gotten it done. And I really think with those other guys gone, Van Jefferson will do that more often than he has. Okay, guys, that thumbs up button. Continue to help us grow. Get those questions on in. Let's get that mailbag full. Only 13. Come on, get that numbers up. Those are rookie numbers, Wolfpack. More questions, more likes. Pump us up. We really, really would appreciate that. Thanks again for being here. We already covered Jeremy McNichols. As I said earlier, I think it's the Adrian Peterson show. I do think McNichols sees his role grow to the point that he should be rostered, but where I think I'd spend about $10 on him, I think most people will be spending 30 to 40, hoping that he is the guy. The younger, at this stage, more athletic guy, but but I still think Adrian Peterson profiles as that, like, again, I shouldn't say glove-like because there is no Derrick Henry out there in the world, never mind a 36-year-old Adrian Peterson, but he has that power style, let me engine it out here type of runner there. So I don't buy Jeremy McNichols. I will be going after Derrick Henry more. Yeah, then that's it. At quarterback, I really like Taysom Hill. Should he be the guy? There are rumblings today that Phillip Rivers might come out of retirement and go to the Saints. What? That would be pretty wild. I'd love to see it, but I don't buy that. I think they're going to move forward with Taysom Hill, the highest paid backup QB in the league. And I'd spend about 5% FAAB at only 3% rostered, certainly in 2 QB leagues. And I have some leagues where I was streaming by the week, Tua this week, and then Darnold the next. This guy could be your every week starter moving forward. Averaged 21.8 points per game last year as the starter. He actually has the most points per dropback across the last 10 years at 0.94 points per dropback. I know some of that's boosted by his rushing yards and all that, the fact that he doesn't drop back much, but that's still pretty damn impressive how efficient he's been when he's on the NFL field. He has that Konami upside, as we all know. He gets Atlanta in his first game back. I mean, last year he put up against Atlanta 28 and 27 fantasy points in his 2 starts against them. He was the QB6 across his 4 starts, only behind Rodgers, Watson, Mahomes, Cousins, Tannehill, some pretty damn good company there. He just lit it up. This is a top potential 6 QB. He was last year. I don't see any reason why this year would be much different. Mike Thomas hopefully coming back soon as well. I think QB3, QB13, QB8, QB11 in his 4 starts. Top 12 in 3 or 4 weeks, and his worst was QB13. That's pretty damn good numbers. His worst output was 18 points. That's solid. That is very solid. High floor, high ceiling. I think Taysom Hill is definitely a priority for 2 QB leagues, or if you're desperate for a streamer this week, maybe a Brady fill-in, or just a fill-in for the rest of the season. I think Taysom Hill would be your guy. I'd be going hard at him. I have a couple more QBs I'll recommend later, but Taysom Hill, definitely the one I'm going after most. This one's certainly likely to be out there in your leagues. Jamal Agnew for the Jaguars, 2% rostered. I'd spend a nice 5% or so on him. Nothing crazy, just because I don't think you're going to have to get him. I still think he's kind of under the radar right now, but he's been labeled the team's best separator. He led the Jags this last week with 20.3% target share across, not just last week, across the 3 games since DJ Chark's been gone. Last week was his biggest game with 12 targets. He hauled in only 6 of them, 38 yards, nothing crazy, but a touchdown to go with that. So very high upside, 8.3 targets per game. That's pretty dang solid. I don't know why I keep saying dang, but we're going with it tonight, folks. Wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 type of floor there with that type of volume. Urban Meyer's been kind of talking about him as like the next Cordarrelle Patterson, that special teamer that's so dynamite with the balls in his hand. Let's kind of scheme him into the offense more. Trevor Lawrence, I've read a lot about Jamal Agnew today, talking a lot about how he has his trust on big 3rd down conversions. This is a guy he's looking for that's consistently open here. Meanwhile, Laviska Shenault, who's 4 targets compared to 12 for him, droppable at this point, 13 yards. We saw Agnew triple him up in every category in terms of receptions, yards, targets. He's the guy now. And yes, Marvin Jones will have his deep ball role, but only 5 catches for 35 yards, 7 targets. Like, Agnew is their number 1 receiver right now in this Cordarrelle role. He's also moving into the backfield kind of all over the face. He's that joker role that we wanted Laviska Shenault to be. So I think moving forward, Agnew's role is going to only continue to climb. They clearly suck. I mean, how many attempts do we have for Trevor Lawrence? 57 this last week. They're just so bad, and they're going to need to continue to chuck. So I think Jamal Agnew is worth your consideration if you're wide receiver needy. Moving on to my number 10 guy, that's Tua Tags. So let's say you miss out on Taysom Hill, or you just need a bye-week plug-in and you don't want to pay up for a rest of season type starter. I think Tua is a great potential stream. Yes, he crashed to earth against the Bills. Guess what? That's what everybody does. They haven't allowed more than 5.0 yards per play all season against any QBs, never mind Tua. So that was too bad. That was tough. But what's the perfect remedy? The Houston Texans, who are giving up the 3rd lowest pressure rate right now, and Tua's struggle. That's where you get after him. Is anytime he's got the blitz on him, anytime someone's in his face, he struggles. That kind of makes sense. Shorter guy, all that good stuff. But they are one of the worst in terms of just being right into their coverage shells, not really blitzing, not creative in their defense with Lovie Smith here over in Houston. I think the Dolphins, this is a get-right spot. They're averaging, as we said, 126 pass attempts since Tua returned, over 40 pass attempts against the Texans defense would make this guy a great play. He was a QB 10 when he first came off in week 7, Tua was, and he was the number 1 QB in week 7 when we recommended him as a streamer. And last week, obviously, again, a dud against the Bills, but 2 of his 3 weeks, he's been top 10, including a number 1 QB performance. And the schedule remains pretty dang soft throughout the rest of the year. We talked about, again, how soft it was with Devante Parker. Now that all his weapons are going to be there, I think Tua is in the mix for borderline QB1 start the rest of the year. If you're looking for a 1-week stream at running back, could do a whole lot worse than Carlos Hyde. It wasn't a serious injury for James Robinson. Now, Hyde 7% rostered, 2 to 4%. Like this, again, 1 week, Phil, and I'm not going crazy to get this guy. They're saying Robinson, not a serious injury. He could even be back as early as this week. That's why you don't want to go crazy and how much you spend here. But we did see 15 of 23 backfield touches go to Hyde. He played a season-high 66% of snaps, pretty much all of the ones once Robinson went out. Dare did see 15, but most of these went to Carlos Hyde. 8 of 11 targets, too. So you'd think, Dare Ogunbowale, whatever the hell his name is, would get more. But no, 11 targets going to, or 8 of them, rather. Total 11 total backfield targets. 8 of them went to Carlos Hyde. He had a 15% target share, more targets than Visca and Marvin Jones this last week. Buffalo, tough matchup, not an easy spot here, but just on sheer volume, we could see like 60 yards, maybe falls into the end zone if they can get anywhere close. Just a bye week plug-in that you can keep in mind. Another bye week plug-in at wide receiver, especially if Mike White, the god, continues to play, led the NFL in passing last week, over 400 yards. One of his favorite targets was Jamison Crowder. He's now seen 30 targets in his 4 games so far this year. Nice, nearly 8 target per game clip. He's caught 23 for 203 yards and a touchdown across that span. Last week had a nice 8 catches over 84 yards right there. Solid. And he now has 12 or more in 2 of 4 games so far this year. If you go back to last year, go to his last 16 games, he has now had 82 receptions, 902 yards, and 7 touchdowns. That's like very, very high-end wide receiver 3. He was on a tear last year. Don't see that continuing. But with Corey Davis, short week, Thursday Night Football, likely to be out again, I could see Jamison Crowder having another solid day. One of the worst graded secondaries, the Colts, on Thursday Night Football. They're among the bottom 5 in PFF's pass coverage grades. I could see Crowder and Mike White hooking up early and often. Yet again, a very solid stream this week while you have Mike White there and no Corey Davis. In terms of a nice stash here, Jeff Wilson, we've talked about him plenty of times as a great IR candidate. 17% roster. He's gotten dropped in a lot of leagues. I'd say a nice 5 to 6% of your FAAB. Well worth it, because for a while there were reports he's not coming back till the end of November. You might get 2 or 3 weeks of the guy. He's back at practice now, though. So that opens up the 21-day window. Maybe he needs all 21 days, and it is the end of November till we see him. Could be as early as this week that he's activated, though. Don't forget, this guy led the team in rushing last year, rushing yards, rushing touchdowns, had 10 total TDs. That was 10th among all running backs in the league, and he missed multiple games and still put up those types of stats. He has Atlanta, Tennessee, and Houston in the fantasy playoffs. He was the running back 4 in fantasy across the fantasy playoffs last year. So he's balled out in the past before when you need him most. Maybe he'll do the same this week. I will point out Eli Mitchell has become the absolute workhorse here. 18 carries, 137 yards, and a TD. Last week, 7.2 yards after contact. I mean, he looks really, really good. Easy RB2 with quality RB1 upside each and every week in this scheme. He's seen 81% of the carries. This is his backfield. But Jeff Wilson is a beast. He's played really well in the past, and Eli Mitchell's already gotten dinged up a couple times. He's dealing with a rib injury right now, too. We'll see. I could easily see Mitchell coming into Jeff Wilson coming into some late season value here, and well worth that IR spot at this point now that he's back to practice. Last 2 are going to be a couple tight ends if you need some seam stretchers. I'd first look to Dan Arnold, 5% rostered. Again, there's 2 guys here, so I'd only spend a few bucks, get one of them. But Dan Arnold would be my favorite. He now has run 43 routes on the 58 dropbacks of Trevor Lawrence this last week. So just 52 pass attempts is crazy. That volume is sexy as all hell. And he saw 10 targets, second on the team behind Agnew, led the team in receptions with 8. Solid day here for Dan Arnold. He's now up to an 18.5% target share since DJ Chark went down. right on that fringe of a tight end one, in my opinion, given the volume he's seeing. It hasn't been all that productive, but volume is volume at tight end. It's you can't be too picky here. And this guy is seeing it. He's seen like 8+ targets in back-to-back weeks. Solid stuff. And then you got Pat Freiermuth rounding out my top 15 here, playing a season-high snaps, 45, 60%, seeing 7 targets, 17.5% target share. That was 2 weeks ago. That got bumped up to 20.5% target share this last week. So back-to-back weeks, setting that season high. Ran 27 routes. That was also his season high on nearly 70% of Big Ben's dropbacks. Granted, there was no Ebron there, and when he returns, it might eat into that workload a bit. But Freiermuth, every time he's out there, he's making plays. If you didn't see it yet, his touchdown catch was a thing of beauty. So he's another guy at only 11% rostered, well worth 2 to 3% of your FAAB if you need a tight end, certainly as long as Ebron's out. But I think rest of season-wise, he's shown he's such a big playmaker. I don't expect him to go anywhere moving forward. Just wanted to mention Derek Gore after last night. What happened there. For a while, it was looking like he might be the every down back. We did eventually get a return from Daryl Williams, certainly as a pass catcher. He did his damage, 6 catches, 60 yards, got it done in those situations. But Derek Gore did kind of force us into a committee with 11 carries, 48 yards, and a TD. There was like a drive where he just got carry after carry after carry, and he drove them down the field himself. He was the engine of this attack. Still, he ultimately only played 16 snaps compared to 52 for Daryl Williams, ran 4 routes, saw 0 targets. He nearly matched Daryl Williams with 11 carries compared to 13 for Williams. But when they needed to throw, Daryl Williams was the guy running 35 routes, 6 targets. He's still the guy here. So it looked for a little while like Derek Gore might be a priority, but with only 16 snaps, yeah, he'll mix in for a handful there. But if he didn't find the end zone, 48 rushing yards, we wouldn't even be talking about this guy right now. So just keep him on the radar. Did want to mention Michael Gallup as well. We mentioned him a few weeks in a row. He's only 40% rostered. So out there in a lot of leagues. I actually have him on my team, and I'm going to be cutting him for a lot of the other guys we discussed. Hopefully I'll get one of them. I don't know that you need to have this guy on there, but last time he played, they did attempt 58 pass attempts. That was a season high. I do think that's partly because they were facing Tampa Bay. They went all in on the air, and he still only managed 4 catches for 36 yards. I think he's about the 5th option on this team behind, obviously CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper. Then you got Dalton Schultz, who's really emerged. Then the backfield. How much value will he actually have in that type of role? So I have no problem cutting him, but if you have bench trash, cut him for this guy, because if there was ever an injury to a CeeDee Lamb, to Amari Cooper, he's very talented. He could be at some of the team's wide receiver ones in this league. So I really like Michael Gallup moving forward for sure. And then just a couple quick defenses. That's just a couple of questions I get every week about the best defenses to look at. Well, the Saints are out there in a lot of leagues because Tampa Bay last week, they manhandled them. They had 15 points against Tom Brady's offense. That's all you need to know about how good this defense is. They're among the tops in points per game right now. And they get a cakewalk matchup coming up here against the Atlanta Falcons. They only had 213 yards this last Sunday. And without Calvin Ridley, that offense is going to struggle. So I think the New Orleans Saints at home is going to swallow them up. If they're not out there, I've seen Pittsburgh out there in a ton of leagues. They get a cakewalks matchup against Chicago at home. Then they face Detroit next week. That would probably be my number one ad, should they be out there. Indy also gets the Jets on Thursday Night Football. That should be a doozy right there of a matchup. Yes, Mike White made this offense look better than it's looked all season, but that's still a good play. They're giving up the most points to defenses. There's still going to be some interceptions there. If none of those 4, because again, 46% rostered or higher for all 3 of those, none of those are out there. Miami could be a desperation stream. They are facing Houston. But if Tyrod Taylor, who is day-to-day right now, does end up playing, I wouldn't even want to go near Miami because Tyrod had that offense humming quite well. So I'd be a little bit nervous of going there if it's not Davis Mills. Alrighty, folks, that's all we got in terms of my waiver wire pickups. I hope you enjoyed that. Now let us go get on to the mailbag, and we'll hit all your questions. If you haven't already, that thumbs up button does, again, I know I sound like we're begging for it all the time, but ultimately it does help us get out to more people. So if you haven't already hit that thumbs up button, please consider doing it, helping us grow. It would be so appreciated, Wolfpack. What's up, Falanini? Great to see you. Rico Baptiste, another legend here, got offered Gaskin, D. Adams for my Eli Mitchell, Burrow, and Pittman. Oh, I would do that in a heartbeat. Like D. Adams, smash play all day. No reason to avoid that. It depends on who your Joe Burrow is, but is there no other QB you can go do? A Taysom Hill, even on the waiver wires, will be just as good as Burrow down the stretch here. Smash that. I shouldn't say always, but almost always in favor of the stud of the deal. I want to get D. Adams. He's the number one stud there, and you're not really giving up. Like, I like Mitchell. I like Pittman a lot. Both good players, but D. Adams is like a top 5 overall pick. Yeah, absolutely. Do that trade, Rico. How do I save my season? I'm 3-5. Jay, I don't know. What do you need? You need running backs. You need wide receivers. There's some interesting running backs this week. I would go try to get all in on Adrian Peterson. I don't know that he'll be your savior, but that role, that juicy backfield is up for grabs right now. So that's a good spot to attack. Maybe buy low on some win now guys who've been underperforming, like Keenan Allen. Could be a good guy to get after there. I don't know. It's pretty vague. I wish I could offer you something more specific. Let me know if you have some trades or other needs that I could help you out with here. I was offered Antonio Browns for Connor. I would probably do that. Let's see what your team is here, Trey. Robert Woods, Judy, Michael Thomas, and A-Rob. Yeah, you don't have that many studs here. You got Eckler and Henderson already. Carson, when he comes back, you're loaded there. Gaskin, whatever, he can kind of bridge you over there to Carson. I think you take this deal. You don't need James Conner, and your wide receivers could use that injection. When he's out there, Antonio Brown's a top 10 receiver in terms of points per game right now. He might be the best one on the Bucs. So, yeah, I would take that deal. Absolutely, I would take that deal. Would Jeff Wilson take over when he's back? He could. I think it's the Mitchell show. He's played so well, it would take a Mitchell injury, Gabriel. So I don't think Wilson's just going to walk in and take the job, no. But an injury is not out of the realm of possibility, and I think he could work his way into a goal line role either way. I think absolutely worth rostering to see how that plays out. I don't think it's going to just happen, though, ultimately. I have the third waiver pick, Falanini, in for Taysom. Also, do you think J-Rob and Julio will play? I don't think either is going to play, but there's been nothing really to suggest one or the other either way. We'll know more tomorrow when we hit our ranking show. That's when the practice reports will start to come out. Bailey Fields, what's up? Great to see you. Michael Carter, a must start, and is Pittman a must start this week? Thanks. It would depend on your other options, but they're both. I already got my rankings up a little earlier today. I had jury duty, got out a little early, which was awesome. I was able to get some stuff done ahead of my usual schedule here, which was great. Both of those guys are in my top 15 at both positions, their respective positions. So good chance they're in your lineup. It would depend what your other options are, but they are both great options, yes. Disappointing day. Indeed, it was a disappointing trade deadline day, Jeremiah, for sure. What up, Jeff Lee? Proud to call you my coach. Awesome content, my number one source, fantasy football knowledge. Thanks, bro. You're always so kind and upbeat and just always get me feeling good, Jeff Lee. It's awesome to see you every broadcast. Just as nice to hear these positive words, So often we hear about all the ones we get wrong. So to have people like you coming in and just giving us some kind, I'm not above getting praise. It's awesome. It feels great. So thank you, Jeff. It's awesome. We really appreciate it. And I just want to shout you out too. That super chat over the weekend, $25. What a generous, awesome way to support the site. So thank you so much. I'll toss it out there on the Waiver Wire show. I'm going to hit all your questions. There's no time sensitivity on Tuesdays, but if you feel like supporting the show, you can always toss in a super chat. It means the world. We'll hit those first. We give you a little more depth to the answers. You guys have been awesome on our sit-start shows, giving us that, though. So it's no expectation, but just throwing it out there because you guys have been incredible for us. Matt Feeney, you have Hunter Henry. Been doing fine, but he's TD dependent. Absolutely. And this week he didn't have the touchdown. We saw that doesn't work well, Matt. I mean, I don't know that you should use your waiver claim, though. I wouldn't be playing Arnold over Hunter Henry really anyways. So I would probably just wait this one out, see if he's out there. See if Freiermuth falls to you, right? Maybe Logan Thomas has been dropped. I think Hunter Henry's about as good as it's going to get, though. Touchdown per week type of guy. I wouldn't be burning a claim. I'd kind of want to be moving up the ranks. Maybe tossing some claims for AP, try to get some of the bigger name guys, Boston Scott here this week, but not for Dan Arnold. I would not burn your waiver. Johnny Lau, who should I claim off the waiver wire? Taysom, Great Mike White, Big Ben, or Jimmy G? I got to go Taysom all way there. Atlanta Street. Well, the one risk with Taysom is what if he doesn't end up starting? He's on track to be ready for this week. I'm not sitting here promising you that happens. I'm not inside the Saints locker room. I have no idea. Not in the trainer's room. But if he does play, I have him as a top 10 quarterback this week. I think he's at QB9 for me in my rankings. Like I said, he gets Atlanta. He had 28 and 27 against that team last year. Was a QB6 when he took over as the starter. And as long as, he stays healthy, he's looking like he's the starter the rest of the season. So well ahead of Johnny Lau of all these guys, whether it's a 1-week stream, whether you need him for the rest of the season, I have Taysom well above them. Kind of like Jalen Hurts, but more accurate in terms of Konami upside. Matt Feeney. You have Henry, TD dependent. We just answered that one for you. Try not to repeat yourself. I don't want to put anybody in timeout tonight. Shades, with Ridley out, you think they moved to Patterson to wide receiver? Maybe that increases Davis a little bit, but he's just been so bad. And I think this offense just takes a big hit overall in terms of their just ability to sustain drives and get scoring opportunities, that even if he gets on the field a bit more, Mike Davis, and we saw that this last week, I don't know that it ends up actually amounting to a ton of value for the guy. I'm kind of done with him. I've cut him in a lot of leagues where I had shallow benches. I do think Patterson's going to remain highly valuable, but Patterson is really the only Falcon and Kyle Pitts that I'm interested in this year moving forward. Jalord Palillo. My team is Hurts, Wilson, D. Henry, picked up Patterson, or Peterson, I'm guessing you meant by A. Peterson. Barkley, Henderson, Deontay, Waddle. Very great team. Got a good roster, good lineup. Do I need running back depth? I mean, when Barkley's healthy, between Barkley, Peterson, and Henderson, you got some solid options, but you could look to make a move there at the position. I love Henderson, a little bit injury prone. I'd see Sony Michel out there. You probably want your handcuff there to make sure you have that Rams backfield unlock. You could potentially pack it. It really comes down to Barkley, though. If you have Barkley and Henderson, you're going to have one of the best backfields in your league, most likely, Jalord. If it takes Barkley a while or he gets hurt again, then, it could be ugly. But I think between Peterson, Barkley, and Henderson, you're fine. You don't have to rush or force anything. You do have such good receiver depth that you might be able to pull something off. Maybe you can package you Peterson, and Waddle and get yourself a bigger name at running back. I don't know. But I don't think you have to be sprinting out to do anything. Will Hill hurt AK-41? Falonini, if history is any indicator, granted, every season's different. Every offense is different. We can't say just last year is going to automatically happen this year, but he crushed his value last year, if you don't remember that. 4 games with Taysom Hill, he averaged 14 points per game, Kamara. 9 games without him, he had 27, nearly doubled the points when he was with Breeze as compared to Taysom Hill. It could be a devastating hit for him. The receiving work was really what got killed. He went from nearly 9 targets a game to just 4 targets a game, 2.5 receptions per game with Taysom Hill compared to 7.5 receptions per game with Drew Brees. So, yeah, it could be a huge killer to his value, especially if Mark Ingram continues to get worked in a bit more. I am nervous. I'm not sitting here selling Alvin Kamara for nothing. He's still in my top 12 overall rest of season. But if I could move this guy and get like Jonathan Taylor, Austin Eckler maybe, I'd probably there's some running backs I definitely have above AK-41 the rest of the season. But let's let it play out, right? Because what if Phillip Rivers goes there? Nobody's peppered the running back more than Phillip Rivers in his career. So if you can make a move and get something like an elite running back like Eckler, I had a word vomit there, couldn't get it out. Eckler or something of that nature, go for it. But otherwise, I don't think you don't have to be going crazy. But yeah, I'm worried. I am worried. Roth Tiberius Kane. Call me nuts, but I'm leaning Ty Johnson over Carter. You're a little bit nuts, but Ty Johnson, even, yes, Carter was the show last week, and he's seen 70% of snaps. Like, Carter's definitely the guy, in my opinion. 29 opportunities. But Ty Johnson got, 18 opportunities? He also saw, I think, 8 to 9 targets last week. It's because Mike White loves to pepper it. So I do think Ty Johnson, I know I wasn't on my top 15, but as a 1-week stopgap this week, I think he's very viable at this point. He certainly gets more red zone volume, so that's like what he has going for him. That's assuming, of course, Tevin Coleman remains out. Then it could get ugly. But yeah, if Coleman's out for 1 more week, I do think Ty Johnson's able to be in your lineups. I would not go him over Carter, though. No way, in my opinion. Carter gets in space better, whereas those linebackers for the Colts could swallow up Johnson, who does more of the dirty work up the middles. So I would think you're crazy for that. I will call you crazy. Sarah Riley, what's going on? Lost the past 2 weeks. I'm sorry to hear it, Sarah. I know we've probably gotten at least 1 or 2 wrong for you in that span too. Because you always have brutal sit starts because your team's so good. It's so hard to pick the best one each and every week. So who should you drop of these guys? Davis, Waddle, Claypool, Sanders for Kirk, Drake, Boston Scott, D. Parker, A. Peterson. Oh, tough question. I know Sanders is coming off the 0. I wouldn't drop him or Claypool or Waddle. I would probably drop Davis for Peterson, though. Davis for Scott or Davis for Parker. I would drop Davis. The rest of those guys I would hang on to. But yeah, I think Mike Davis to try to get one of those other guys, prioritizing Peterson, would be how I'd approach that. With Ruggs going to jail, you think Edwards is going to boom now. I hate to even give analysis off such a tragic situation. Prayers up to the victim's family there in that car accident. Just awful stuff. How can you not be smarter than that? You have the money to never have to drive again in your life, Ruggs. Awful stuff. Don't want to get whatever. Awful. Prayers up for the family. I hate to give analysis on such a tragic situation, but it can't hurt Renfro or Edwards or Waller to have a more narrow target tree ever. That's all I'm going to say on that, though. I don't want to go into depth. It's sick to think about. Awful stuff. Awful stuff. Deontay Johnson for Hopkins straight up. I mean, I might even prefer Deontay. This is damn close. And if I would probably lean on whatever side I already have, unless you're losing and you need the shakeup. If you're winning and you got what you got, don't shake up the locker room. It's not like one side's a clear winner. I do think Deontay has the higher floor every week. I mean, he's seen 13 targets in back-to-back games. He's averaging over 12 a game. That's a safer player. Hopkins still has the ceiling, but Kyler Murray is kind of crumbling without the running. He seems hurt. I might take Deontay for him the more I think about it. Yeah. Josh Jacobs and B. Cooks for CD. I need help at running back. I don't hate the deal. Now, do we know Jacobs is back this week yet? Let's see the practice reports. Let's make sure he's out there, because you don't want to pull this trigger, Charlie, and then have Jacobs not even be out there this week, right? That would blow. So let's make sure he's playing. But if so, I mean, especially if you need the help at running back and you're in win now mode, you get B. Cooks with facing Miami. Tyrod should be back soon, and those two were hooking up regularly. I don't hate this deal. I don't love it because I'm not a huge Jacobs guy, but if you're desperate at running back, I would ask around and see if there's better than Jacobs out there. But at the end of the day, if Jacobs is healthy and ready to go, and I know you do standard, he's certainly better in standard, this might end up being an okay trade for you. Yeah. But I would ask around and see what you can get first. Fantasy points are different than ESPN. Why? I don't know, Sandra, what you're asking right here. Sorry. Some leagues are half PPR, some are full point PPR, some are standard leagues. So I think you can customize those however you want on all these. If you're asking about the rostership percentage, that's going to be different on every site. These are the 3%, and those are based on Yahoo, if that's what you're asking. I'm not sure exactly what you're asking, though, Sandra. Let me know if I can be a little clearer for you. Thoughts on Renfro and the Raiders D special teams? I do think Renfro, if he's out there, very intriguing now that the target tree is going to be even a little more narrow. Been steady all year. I think it's every game he's seen 6+ targets, 5+ catches, other than maybe one so far this year. So decent PPR option for sure. Very low ceiling, but nice bye week. You'll get 10 and you can be okay with that, right? So that's kind of his play, Will. And Raiders D, I don't know. I'm not into them that much. Johnny Lau, half PPR, JT Mixon, D'Ernest, running back 1, 2, 3. D'Ernest is I do think you should try to get yourself another running back 3 because he might have another good game or 2 until Hunt's back. But even then, we saw this week only 4 carries, 3 targets. That's not a ton of bankable volume moving forward. He found the end zone. Nice looking cut. And they were down all game, so maybe if they're up there, they use the backs and lean on them a little bit more. But this was not a promising first week with Chubb back for D'Ernest rosters. The touchdown was nice, but you should probably have a better RB3 moving forward after these next couple of weeks dry up. The only running back on my roster is Mixon after the injury. Oh, man. Sorry, Zephrika. That's tough. Besides some trash backups. How do you feel about a CD for Chubb? Especially if you need a running back, I would pull that trigger. I think you're getting better than you could have expected. If you're that desperate, Zephrika, I think Chubb's as good as you could hope for. I know he hasn't been amazing this year, but Chubb is historically one of the best runners in the league. Didn't do a ton against the Steelers, but they're a bottom 3 matchup for running backs. Hunt being out, now he gets an easy matchup against Cincy. I think we're going to see a monster Chubb day starting this week. That's about as good as you can hope for. I think your opponent is giving you too much given how desperate you are. So I would pull that trigger. Steve Adams playing this week. I don't know, Will. I sure hope so. What the hell? If not, is Lazard worth a flex play? Probably. It seems like Cobb is going to be his go-to, but Lazard was out last week, so we don't know. It's against the Chiefs. They're going to need points. Well, I keep saying that, but the Chiefs' offense sucks. So I don't know why I say that every week. But they do suck on defense either way. So Cobb, Lazard, if Adams is out, both those guys are in play. No doubt about it. He probably should have been in my stash and see list. I imagine Adams is going to play, right? He just needed to have 2 negative COVID tests. I believe he was vaccinated was the report I read. But if he wasn't vaccinated, he needs 10 days. And even then, he should still have enough time to be back. My expectation is he's playing. He's my number 2 receiver behind only Cooper Kupp this week, but maybe not. We'll have to see. The fact that he hasn't been activated yet, it's a little sketchy. I'm with you, Will. I'm a little bit nervous about that. 34 of you in here. If you haven't already, hit that thumbs up. Help us continue to grow. If you like the content so far, you want your questions routinely answered, please consider subscribing as we go on our mission to get to 2K by the end of the year. That bell gang, hit the bell so you know when we're live and it can notify you there. If you're on Facebook and you want to move over to YouTube, that's where we're going to kind of start to centralize. We're going to be abandoning Facebook soon. So consider joining us over there on YouTube if you haven't already subbed and turned that bell on so you know when we're live every night. I had McCaffrey. I was offered Najee. And just thank you again, guys, for being here. Whether you get the thumbs up, whether you sub or not, just you being here and listening to our opinions is so appreciating and humbling that you care what we have to say. But I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to answer your questions and hope you consider you like the content enough to subscribe and listen to more of us. Samwise, I have McCaffrey. I was offered Najee, Lockett, and Cooks for McCaffrey, Hubbard, and Jefferson. Should I accept? This is a pretty tricky one. You're giving up that Carolina backfield. Obviously, way more exciting when McCaffrey's out there. Jefferson, you're giving up a lot here. I mean, if McCaffrey's healthy, he's the number 1 player in fantasy. That's a huge if. If he's not healthy, I mean, Najee's number 1 on my rest of the season big board right now. Lockett moving forward with Russell back, awesome player, but I prefer Jefferson to him. Do you need that wide receiver depth, Samwise? Like, do you need Lockett and Cooks for Jefferson? Or is one of them going to be on your bench all the time? Because if you need those 2 starters, then I think you do it. If Cooks is going to be in like a rotation, he's not a huge upgrade over your 3, I think you turn it down. But that is a big risk because if McCaffrey just never comes back, then you passed up a chance at Najee, who's the number 1 player. So are you in win now mode? Can you stomach McCaffrey longer or not? There's a lot of factors that go into this. I lean towards accepting it, especially if you do need that wide receiver depth and especially if you're in win now mode. Would you trade Kelsey and J-Rob to get D. Adams and Deontay? Yes. Oh, yeah. Kelsey, I mean, you know how much I loved him coming into the year, but 32, it seems like he's hit a cliff. Famous last words. I hope they're famous last words because I could really use him bringing his shit together. But, man, he's been a painful play these last few weeks. D. Adams over Kelsey all day, and then J-Rob versus Deontay. I'd prefer Deontay in a vacuum. If you need the running back, I get running back depth a little more scarce, but to me, this is a no-brainer. I take the D. Adams and Deontay side and never look back. We need that beard back for Kelsey is what we really need. It's time to worry about Mahomes and Kelsey. What a follow-up question from Sarah. I think a little bit. Mahomes is making horrible throws. I mean, this is not the Mahomes of the last few years. Seen a ton of stats in terms of like he's averaged 6 or less yards per attempt in 4 of 6 games this year. That's only happened 3 times his like entire career before this year. And just like sailing it over receivers' heads, uncharacteristic inaccuracy. And the offense is just not moving the ball nearly. Before it was like they're going to probably score a touchdown almost every single drive. This year, it's been like a struggle for every single point. Kelsey's not moving around, and like he's certainly not as open as he used to be. I don't know what's happening there. I am a little bit worried. I think it is time to worry about these guys a little bit, Sarah. Absolutely. The Giants was not a good defense, and they did not look good against them. Should I drop Schultz for Freiermuth? I prefer Schultz. I'd like to see what Schultz does with Gallup back, but this one dud game, I'm not going to overreact to because when Dak's been out there, he's been the tight end 5. Like I'm okay with having Schultz out there. And obviously you have Knox too. Like that's fantastic whenever he comes back. Van Jefferson or Boston Scott PPR. Is this in terms of who do you start this week? Is this in terms of who do I prioritize? Well, Eric, that's kind of an easy one in terms of do you need the wide receiver or do you need the running back? Most of us need the running back. So I have Scott higher in my personal rankings. I need him more than the wide receiver. And if I'm starting one this week, it's probably Boston Scott over Van. But Van does bring a ton of juice to the upside. And if you're shallow at receiver, I really like what he brings to the table. But most times I'm answering this question, I'm answering Boston Scott. Ash Dobbs, how bad was Ruggs hurt? Will he play? So one, I don't think he's going to play for a while, not whether or not because of injury. I think obviously because of the legal situation going on there. I think we're not going to see him for a while. Will Barkley play this weekend? Can you drop Booker? I think you have to wait and see. There's been no, he didn't practice in full in a while. He had some limited walkthroughs last week, but didn't ever get the pads on. I don't think you can drop Booker until we know Barkley's back. And even then, if you have Barkley, you probably want to hold on to Booker given how fragile Barkley's been these last few years. Kurt, when is Montgomery coming back? I know it's got to be right around the corner. I mean, it's been 4 weeks now, so they only have a handful more weeks to activate him. But the way Herbert's playing, they're not in any rush here. So with Robinson and Gibson on bye, that's not helping. But yeah, could you get Adrian Peterson? Can you get Boston Scott? This is a oddly, uniquely loaded week at waiver wire for running back. So you have some fill-ins to at least help you get there this next couple weeks. Ruggs is under investigation. Yeah, he's not going to play. He might never play again, like you said, Eric would. Certainly not this weekend and maybe never again, given the fact that he's likely intoxicated and is now being implicated with, the death of somebody else in a DUI type of case. We probably aren't going to see him again this year and maybe ever. And I don't know that we should. It's just messed up. Eric, too. I have weak running backs right now. D. Williams, Collins, CMC. Yeah, pretty gross. When CMC comes back, it definitely makes a difference. But D. Williams I don't know if that's Daryl Williams. That's okay. If it's Damian Williams, it's not okay. Thinking about trading Diggs and Waller, Claypool for Henderson and Mitchell. That's a hefty price, Eric, too. I think if your receivers are good enough to absorb that, you go from Diggs and Claypool and you still have a couple wide receiver 2s and 1s on the roster, okay. You know your team better than me. That's too high I think Waller's one of the best buy lows, as do I think of Diggs. Claypool, I don't love. I think you're selling low on those guys, especially once CMC's back. I would try to do something a little less impactful. Can you pull off Claypool for Mitchell? Can you pull off Claypool and Daryl Williams for Mitchell? Something of that nature. Not have to give up Diggs and Waller. See if you can get something a little less boom there. Eric Underwood, Van Jefferson versus Boston Scott. You got the first pick on waivers this week. I prefer Boston Scott in the vacuum, but it always comes down to team need. And as I said earlier, I prefer Adrian Peterson before either of them. But I know you do PPR, so either of those guys could be more valuable in those types of formats. Rico, trade away Mitchell, Burrow, and Pittman for D. Adams and Gaskin. I told you at the top, I think you stole. I love that trade for you. Deontay and Sanders. For your wide receivers after. Yeah, so you got pretty good receivers behind CD. So, it helps you out again, Preble. Allen Harris, Gaskin, Carson, Javonte, Daryl Williams, Diggs, Deontay. Yeah, I mean, those receivers are fucking crazy right there. Diggs, D. Adams, Deontay, Jamar. Can you start all 4 of them? Is it 3 receivers and a flex? Because that's a monstrous lineup. If you can only start 2 and then a flex, then you probably should look to move Daryl or Gaskin and one of those guys to get a big upgrade. But otherwise, I love it. If you can start all 4 of them. Grind don't stop. Top waiver claim. Get here on time and you'll know, man. It's AP for me. I love AP. It's both of your questions here. So I think he's going to be the guy. I think he's going to see 15 plus. He's going to get the goal line work in an offense that's second in terms of touchdowns, 13. Most in terms of rush attempts. I think he's the guy. But if you want more of a take, grind don't stop. That's the first guy I talk about. So get on over here. I have you've asked around. Yeah. Everyone wants Dalvin. That's tough. I mean, maybe if you can get 2 good guys for Dalvin, you got to maybe consider that, Prebs. Kamara, we already talked about this grind. You got to get here on time, man. We talked about that big time. But yes, in terms of last year, I'll reiterate the stats really quickly, but you want the more in-depth one, just rewind the show. You got a lot of things we talked about already here. So when Taysom Hill was the QB, Kamara averaged 14 points per game. When Breeze was the QB, he averaged nearly 28. It was really cut in half. 2.5 receptions per game compared to 7.5. That's huge. That's absolutely huge. So each year could be different, but certainly last year it impacted them big, and it's something you have to consider moving forward. I think Schaub and Kelsey makes sense. If you can get someone to bite on the name value at this point, that absolutely makes sense. Say the site's moving away from Facebook. I do think, Alan, we like the interaction on YouTube better, the platform. It's just easier. And Facebook, we're just not getting any views or interaction anymore. I think they're kind of, when we split it between the two, Facebook's really dinging us. So we kind of are thinking we might go all in on YouTube moving forward. We want to appease the guys that have been with us forever, like you. So we don't want to just like abandon Facebook, but we're considering it for the future. Would you have Knox or L. Thomas rest of the season? Knox, definitely. The touchdowns are insane. Claypool was dropped. Oh, yeah. I would Bateman versus him. That's close for me, but I probably would prefer Claypool, yeah. Thoughts on McNichols? I'm not huge into him, Emil. Not that big. I'm more of an AP guy here. I could be wrong, and PPR-wise, McNichols does have the more receiving upside, but I don't think his role is going to change all that much. Rewind the show if you want a bigger take on why. That's the first one I give for about 5 minutes to start the show. If Taysom doesn't play this week, who do I stream, Tua or Tannehill? I would stream Tua this week, I think. Really like that matchup against Houston. 6 most points to QBs. Awful secondary. Like that should be no problem. I'd go Tua over any of those other guys you mentioned. You got Tannehill against the Rams. That's a tough matchup. 3 receivers in a flex, even stronger, Rico. Love that. Love that team. Trade Gaskin for Jacobs. Yes, in a heartbeat. Gaskin a little more receiving upside, but we've seen how fluctuating that workload is. But Jacobs is in. He's scoring touchdowns. He's getting the majority of the work. That's how it's been all year. Yes, I would absolutely do that, Red X. Awesome, guys. Well, thank you again so much for being here. Wolfpack on your Tuesdays. Best of luck. I hope you get all the waiver wire goods that you're hoping for. If you don't, on the way out, if you haven't hit that thumbs up and you were willing to, help us continue to grow and mean the world. If you're not subbed, if you're not part of the Wolfpack, oh, man, hit that sub button, hit the bell. Help us hit that goal of 2K by the end of the year. I would love that. So thanks again so much for being here. Face, I would go Tua over Wentz, but both of them are very solid streamers indeed. You can find all our content, though, RoadStreetJournal.com, Breed and Feed Fantasy Wolves, our iOS app, and if you prefer podcasts, these are available on the Fantasy Full Bag Dive, wherever you listen the next day. But thanks again so much for being here, Wolfpack. I really appreciate it. In a world full of fancy sheep, you can find me at Road Street Wolf, by the way. In a world full of fancy sheep, be the wolf. Later, guys.